In this video, we are going to talk about how my ex-husband, my daughter's biological father, shook her and did not receive any jail time. That's probably the number one comment that I get is, how could someone do that and not receive any jail time? And just like responding to this comment, no, it's not because I just let him go and just didn't seek out any kind of justice. And so this is my husband, Keeney, and my current husband. He is not the person who shook her, in case that needs to be clarified here. And he's just here basically to help me to remember anything that I might forget as we talk about this. This was about 7 years ago when this was going through the court system and stuff like that. And so he's going to try to help me stay on topic and, get through those points. But also a side note that forgiveness has absolutely nothing with justice, and you can forgive someone and still seek out justice. That's even talked about in the Bible. It doesn't mean that you just let someone do something or let someone be abusive just because you chose to forgive. Okay, so we can get into that on a different video, and I actually have past videos. But this is basically what happened. Okay, so he of course wasn't in my life at that time, but when she was shaken about 7 years ago, she was alone overnight with her biological father, who I choose not to name. And so during that time, she had seizures, she had a stroke, she coded once she got to the hospital. After all that, he didn't take her. He actually dropped her off with my sister, who was supposed to babysit her while we both worked. We were separated at the time, so that's why she was alone with him. A lot of people have such an issue with why a child was alone with her biological father, and it's because we were separated. And so this happens all the time. I don't know why that's such a problem. So anyways, as you can probably tell, I get so many comments like this that are just like, people assume so many things and they don't actually know anything that they're talking about. They'll watch a few videos on here and think that they know everything about someone, everything about me, everything about my family and the situation, and they don't have a clue. But they make those assumptions based off of a few videos that they've seen, and they just want to put their opinion, I guess. So, moving forward, she was shaken by him, and he did not confess that. So there was no other thing that could have happened. He did. Okay, so let's fast forward to court, just for the sake of this video staying short. He shook her overnight. We're at court about a month later, a month or two maybe, I think. I can't even remember now, after the initial injury. And at that point, the DCS investigation had already taken his custody. So I never had my custody taken. They took his custody and made it to where he was supervised visits only. And that was based off of their investigation up to that point, until they could get it into the court system and decide what was going to go from there. Let's see, what else am I trying to think? This is hard to like.
Well, I mean, really, when it came down to it, is you were not consulted, or is it the DCS legal team did not tell you what they had already talked to the judge about?
Yeah. So court was a very long day. Lots of things happened during that time. He basically admitted but didn't admit to it. So like, he said everything else that he could have possibly said, like that he was a drug addict and all of these things he admitted in court, and admitted to neglecting her on purpose. When he was asked things like, so let me back up real quick. I was not the one taking him to court. DCS, which is like the government
Department of Child Safety.
Yeah. Took him to court. The DA, I guess, whoever, whatever. And he hired his own attorney to represent him. So, you're talking about a mother, me, a single mother of a special needs child overnight, who had to provide for 2 children, who had $0 to spend on an attorney. And so for the people who have this problem with me not being able to push justice and stuff, have no idea what it's like to be in that situation. And also, I don't think that at that point, since it was in the government's, in these states, like jurisdiction, I guess, that I could have even done anything extra.
And with it being handled by them, you might not have felt the need at that point to pursue any legal action.
Well, yeah.
Because they were doing it,
right,
as far as you know.
Yeah, and so I fully expected to go in there that day and come out with him in cuffs going to jail. That was my expectation. I thought, oh, the state is on him. They're going to get him. And so I felt no need to hire a legal person anyway, because actually I think there was like 2 or 3 attorneys that were representing her through the state. And so... and DCS. So it was the attorneys plus the state people who do all these investigations. So
at the end of court, how did that go with the judge, and pretty much what happened at the end there? So,
well, because of his like confession of neglect during court, where he, he basically dug himself into a hole by just talking and saying a bunch of random things. Well, he admitted that she was lethargic. She wouldn't take a bottle. He knew something was wrong, and her attorney was like, well, why didn't you contact your wife and tell her that something was wrong with the baby? And he said, I didn't want to hear her griping at me, so I didn't do anything about it. So he admitted to neglect, to knowing that something was wrong. He should have gotten her medical help, should have called me, and didn't. So he kind of, admitted to that part of the situation. Again, she laid there and had a stroke all night long, seizures all night long, and so there was definitely no way to not know something was wrong with her. Anyways, so the end of this long court day, like 6 hours, 7 hours, the judge and all of the attorneys went back into this back room to deliberate or whatever, and they come back and tell me that they're making a deal with him. And so, that was very upsetting to me. Number one, I'm like, what do you mean making a deal? I was expecting it to go to trial, to get him in cuffs, okay, all this. And basically, they thought that, how would you describe that? What did they were...
Well, so anytime you go to court, anytime before you get to an actual court date, you can make a deal. And in fact, it's like there's as many cases
a trial.
Before you go to trial, you can do a deal. But as many cases go to trial are made from are 50% of cases like go as deals instead of to trials. I mean, so it happens a lot. But the point being is that they could do that because if they go to trial, it's put up in front of all these people, and they have to all conclude that beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty of abuse. If I remember correctly, he denied abusing her that whole court date, but he knew something was wrong. That was the thing, is he knew something was wrong, but he would not admit to actually doing anything to her.
Yes.
And so that's why he got neglect. And so the deal was essentially, which I guess you can go over, but the point being that they didn't feel like they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it, because they had no evidence whatsoever aside from him being the last person who was with her when this happened.
Well, yeah, and then
his own testimony and whatnot. Right.
Was the only evidence that something happened.
There was all kind of like timeline evidence, but not him saying anything or whatever. So they didn't think that going to trial would actually get the case any further than it was going to get with the deal.
Yes. So the deal was that oh my gosh,
he would plead guilty to neglect.
Okay, yes. So that he would plead guilty to neglect, and if he did that, they would drop criminal charges because they caught on to his personality, to the way he was reacting, his character, whatever, that the most important thing to him was not going to jail. He didn't care about custody. He didn't care about all these other things that they knew they could use that against him. So in their eyes, they were protecting her by saying, hey, if you will agree to supervised visits only, keeping it like that, you have no custody, and to doing all of these things. And so they listed out a bunch of things: anger management, drug and alcohol classes, counseling,
parenting.
Yeah, parenting classes.
So 4 different classes he had to take before. So he had supervised visitation only, but if he completed those 4 classes and followed all of the recommendations they gave, then he could petition the court to get regular custody given back to him.
Yeah, which was also terrifying.
But that was the thought, was that based on their judgment of the kind of person he was, that he probably wouldn't do that. But the point was to just get him away from the kids as best as they could with what they had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the main reason for the deal was because, so if it went to trial, which they could have done, and pushed for criminal charges, then if our side failed, it would have been like nothing happened. So it would have been, at that time I had filed for divorce too, so it would have been like a regular divorce case where you have every other weekend alone with the kids, whatever, it went with that, like it never even happened.
So just to clarify, if just one of those jurors thought that he didn't do it,
yeah,
then either you would have to go back and do a trial all over again, or the judge could say whatever, that, okay, then he's found not guilty, and then it's just like the DCS investigation. The DCS case never happened, and he would go back to regular custody.
Yeah.
And then you guys' divorce would have a parenting plan or whatever, but he would no longer have had supervised visits.
Yeah. And so now I look back and I was mad at...
So hang on. So there was a really big risk...
Yeah.
In going to a trial, and him going to jail.
Yeah, and that was not what I was focusing on then. So, I was really upset with DCS for not putting him in jail. Because I was like a lot of people who first see our story, and they're just angry. And they're like, he should be in jail, he should be in jail. How could you...
Why isn't he? How couldn't he be?
Yeah, how could you just let him go free? And all of these things. But that is not how it works. And so...
Well, you go ahead and finish what you're going to say, and I just had a thought.
Go ahead, because...
Well, I was just going to say that, so you were not talked to, or DCS didn't let you know they were doing a deal, because it wasn't your decision whatsoever to do a deal at all.
Yeah.
You were not involved in that conversation.
Right.
If you would have pressed charges against him for abuse on your own and failed,
right,
then he could have taken that, and instead of doing all the stuff that the court already said, since he had already been found not guilty of shaking her or whatever, and undone the DCS case that had that deal in place, and had that all undone without doing any of the classes.
Yeah. So people just don't understand the full story, which is why we're trying to, clarify that. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just a cut and dry thing, like you go in and come out and it's easy. Like, there's so many different things. So, like he said, if I had went and been like, I'm not standing for this, I'm getting an attorney, which I did try to do, actually. But, so, back to that day of court, just to finish that up real quick. When they told me about this deal, and I'm just like in shock, like, are you kidding me? He still gets to see her. We had 2 children. An older child who was about 2.5, and then the baby who was shaken. And so I couldn't, I was in shock that he was getting to walk out of there and still be able to hold them, to see them at all. And it was very upsetting. But when I said, I just can't believe this, how can this, how can this happen? And the DCS worker was like, well, there are kids who go back to homes where they were raped. And that's, I hope I'm allowed to say that word on here. But that was DCS's response that I got. And I was like, okay. Like, it doesn't make me feel better. It kind of makes me feel worse, because that's terrifying. But, it felt just all around terrifying. Because now I look back and I see why they did that, and I'm okay with it. And I'm like, yes, that probably was the best decision, and there's no telling what could have happened, because, her older sister is now almost 10 years old, and she could have been put in a situation where she still has to go see the man who killed her sister. And so now I look back and I'm like, okay, they actually did make a good decision, because they saw through him. They see people like him all the time. they know him enough to know that he was going to pick this pathway of, I just don't want to get put in jail, and they probably knew that he would eventually just fall off and never see her again, and he would just disappear, which is what happened. And so this video is getting really long. I'm trying to not go too much longer.
I think you covered the topics.
Yeah. That's how you can get away with this, okay? And pretty much he didn't necessarily get away with it because...
It's how you can get yourself not in jail.
Not in jail.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he got away with it. It wasn't like... So getting away with it would be... He still gets to see...
He has regular custody, regular stuff, like nothing had ever happened. And that's not what happened.
Right.
Yeah. Is what was given to you as the custody, like what exactly you wanted? No, but it's not him getting away with it either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would prefer not to do supervised visits at all.
Yeah.
That wasn't fair, but it protected them.
It also wasn't up to you.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that part wasn't. Yeah.
Now, you could say I didn't fight for her because I didn't try to go back to court and all these things. I did after that for a while. I called like the DA's office. I called all these different attorneys trying to get someone to help me for free because I had $0 to my name. At that time I couldn't even work because I was her 24/7 caregiver. And so, I was calling all these offices. They're like, there's nothing we can do. I think one or two looked over the thing and was like, there's nothing you can do about this. Like, you can't, it is what it is. It's closed, whatever. And so, I tried for a while, but it got to a point where it was taking away from her care. And so I wasn't willing to do that anymore. I had to choose between, I am going to drive myself crazy and try to do something that's probably not going to happen because of the court system, because of the way it works, or I had to choose to take all of that same focus and put it all on her. And that's basically what I did.
You were her full-time caregiver, right?
Yes. And so
at that time,
that was exhausting.
Yeah.
And so people, they try to know, or they try to pretend they know everything, but that's just, you don't know everything about people, and you don't know what they've done or not done. Now, there is a second video I'm going to do about why he didn't go to jail for murder, because she passed away at 3.5 years old. So we'll do that video too. But this answers that question. Sorry this video is so long, but this is why he got away with shaking her without going to jail.